I guess I could start one. Ellen seems to be doing a good job, so maybe it's easier to just move here. So I'm going to talk to you today. I've decided to call my talk, What the F? Creativity is its own reward. If you can stay connected to the feelings that you had when you just started making music, you can persevere in amplifying your own voice in the long term. I'm going to tell you some stories about people who inspired me and also some ways I've gotten past some roadblocks. I'll talk about the cultural importance of making music right now, and I hope you'll come away feeling excited about working on your music for the long term. I'm going to say a lot of F words today, and the first one is fun. The early days of songwriting for me were so much fun. I remember it was like solving puzzles. I was sitting in my dorm room in Northfield, Minnesota, thinking wildly about how to write songs. It was taking up all my time. My grades went from A's to C's, and I just adored it. It felt truly like it was something that clicked for me. And I got into that flow state that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, where time is suspended and you feel at one with the universe. And I hadn't really experienced that before. So it was definitely a hook that lured me in. And after 25 years of writing, that mental destination is harder to reach, that flow state, because I've got competing demands of children and the home and my career. But it is something I aspire to. And the way that I can find it most often is by keeping office hours. So I usually write about 100 songs per album and only keep 10. So I know that many of my hours will be spent wasted just sitting there writing, but I found that in order to suspend judgment and get to those good songs, I just have to write many, many, many more than I keep. And I can sometimes get into that flow state still where time is suspended and I feel so happy to be doing what I'm doing. A lot of times though, you might know this because you're also musicians, you feel like it's drudgery. It's very isolating, it can feel like really hard work. And actually there's a great book called Songwriters on Songwriting. If you haven't read it, it's interviews with songwriters about their craft. And one of the quotes from Leonard Cohen in there was, "Everybody else's job is hard, why shouldn't mine be hard?" So songwriting can be really hard. Any musical craft or any artistic craft can require an incredible amount of patience and discipline and independence and suspended delayed gratification and all of that. But when you do find that good song, it's like emotional gold, and you feel so good to share that, to just have had it all come through you. So it's worth the struggle, it really is, but I know that there are many hours that are difficult getting there. So I try to find ways to trick myself into having fun, because I know that it can be really hard to be in there and isolating and boring. So I turn off my phone, that's been a big one, getting off of the internet for those hours when I'm working, because it's such a distraction. I've actually noticed when I get off social media during a writing phase, I write better because I'm not so distracted by the constant what are they saying, who's doing it? It just allows me to get into a deeper place in my thinking. I switch instruments to trick myself into having fun. I change the tunes. I start with a line of poetry. And I recently made some songwriting cards with prompts on them, which would give me a kind of structure to write each day. And it was a surprise. So one card would say, "Stop making sense." The next card would say, "Write in 5/4 time." And the next card would say, "Make it dark, make it moody." And so I would stick within that structure, and actually a lot of the songs that made my new album's cut were written in that way, where it was just a forced assignment of restriction. So creating games like that can help you get through some of those longer hours of drudgery. My next F word is fear. To be a writer is one thing, and to be a performer is another, and for me, totally terrifying. I remember my first open mic was down in Northfield. I couldn't finish my songs. I had been writing these songs, felt so proud of them, wanted to share them, and suddenly I realized I cannot play at all in front of people. Hands shaking so much that my guitar pick fell, hot skin rising up my cheeks, heart palpitations, shaking. You know, right? Some of you might know. It's a horrible feeling, and I took a slow, agonizing walk of shame back to my seat and realized I've got a lot of work to do here if I'm going to share this music. So I have to figure out how to do it. And it took, years and years of practice to get better at it and to get more comfortable. And now I'm more comfortable than that, but it's still a struggle. And I realize every artist has a cross to bear, and I think that might be mine. It's just difficult for me to perform. But I was in that band recently that Ellen mentioned, Veirs, with Nico Case and Katie Lang. Katie wanted to call it the Camel Tones. Nixed that pretty quick, but you would have thought it'd be so glamorous out there traveling the world with these people, and in a way it was. But I lost 10 pounds of night sweats before our first show. It was at the Greek Theater in LA. At capacity 6,000 Jumbotron, these big stars on the stage with me. I was really freaking out. But I pulled it off, and then the next night, more night sweats, preparing for the next show. And I pulled it off, and I continued to pull it off. But I would every night thought, I'm going to just make this whole thing grind to a screeching halt because I can't do this. My point is, there are those gigs that feel so wonderfully easy, where music is just flowing, and those are the ones that I strive for, and they do come. And I remember that every time I step on stage, I try to remember it could be that night. It could be the one where it is easy, and you wonder why it was ever hard. Another F word is failure. We're all going to experience quite a bit of failure as artists, unfortunately. But about 12 years ago, I was living in Seattle, and I was on the up and up with a career. I could tour the world. I was on None Such Records, which has a prestigious roster. It was a major label. I was able to quit all my day jobs. I was, feeling like pretty hot shit. And I got a call from my record label, and the guy's like, I'm sorry, you're not selling enough records. You're dropped from your contract. Then the next day, I get another call. It's from my booking agent, high-powered booking agent, Sorry, Laura, you're not selling enough tickets. You're dropped from the booking agency. So I was suddenly cast adrift, thinking, okay, maybe songwriting's not for me. Plus, I need work. So I looked at the signpost, and it was like, music teachers wanted. This is in Seattle. We will become the Starbucks of music. Okay, so I applied for the job, and I got the guitar job, which was cool. That was easy, because I play guitar, and then I also got the piano job, which was not cool, because I don't play piano. Read Mary Had a Little Lamb is a stretch. So suddenly, they didn't need guitar teachers, they needed piano teachers. So I was driving all around, teaching piano to kids, and pretending to be like Yoda, like, I'm so powerful and good at this instrument that I don't need to touch the piano. It was really bad when one of my moms, who was really good, was like, will you be my teacher too? And I was like, yes. And then she was so good, and I was so scared before every lesson with her that I quit cold turkey. Was like, all right, back to the songwriting. We got to make this happen. So I did write again, 75 songs later, had my new batch that my boyfriend at the time, and I culled through and made July Flame in our basement studio, which is what I think of now as one of my best records. So I pulled something together inside myself and was like, I can do this. This is, even though the powerful people told me I shouldn't do it or said, sorry, you can't do this with us, that doesn't mean I can't do it. And so I did it again, and then that led to my friend saying, I want to help you run your record label. And then a new manager, my other friend picking me up, and then, it all went from there. So the failure that I felt in those early days was actually a gift. It was a blessing in disguise. My next F word is finances. That's a big one. 25 years ago, I was sitting on my dirty couch in my dirty apartment. We never cleaned our stove. I don't think we cleaned it once all year. And my very handsome boyfriend at the time said something, this fueled me for about 10 years. He said, you can't make money as a musician, or you'll never make money as a musician. And I don't remember which was the exact phrase, but it stuck with me because I was like, oh, really? Let me show you. Because, he wasn't trying to throw me under the bus. He just hadn't seen anyone pull it off, and I hadn't either. So it is really difficult to have a steady income stream as a musician or an artist. I know you guys know this. But what I've learned over the years is that it can really help to take the weird gig. So one of my first tours, we were playing mostly coffee shops and house shows up and down the West Coast. And on one gig, it was a really glamorous one, we had to wake up at 3 in the morning, drive 9 hours. You've been there, right? From Santa Cruz to Eugene. Get to the noon coffee house gig, there's 3 people there. You're exhausted and like, what the did I sign up for here? Turns out one of the audience members was a booking agent from Berlin, and a year later we were speeding down the Autobahn on our first gig in Germany. So that gig that felt so pointless and stupid at the time led to something, a booking in Europe, and then that led to the next thing. And so there's so much grunt work involved in the beginning, especially, but throughout, honestly. But more often than not, those pointless, weird gigs lead to something cool, and sometimes it's money. Friends, I put this one in quotes because sometimes if you're not making a steady income as a musician, your friends will doubt you. When are you going to get a real job? Why don't you become a school teacher? That's my mom, she's a school teacher. And then more recently, why don't you run for city council? So, okay. Am I not in the clear yet? Fine, she's been great, but if you can find genuine satisfaction and purpose in your creative work, you can survive these comments. There are these towers in LA called the Watts Towers, and I visited them once on tour. They're a beautiful folk art masterpiece. They were built by an Italian immigrant living in LA in the 1920s. His name was Sabato Rodia, and he spent 33 years building these giant towers in his yard from scraps that he collected from the neighborhood, rebar, broken glass, and shells, and now they're on the National Register of Historical Places. Imagine you see your neighbor working in his yard like this. You'd think he was crazy. But this guy went out and made something beautiful and lasting, and it was his love of creation that drove him to do it, not approval from others. This is something that we as musicians can take inspiration from. My next F word is fire, and in this case I mean burnout. I feel burnout a lot. Sometimes it's best to just take a break. A while back I'd been writing songs I didn't like for about a year. All the lyrics were coming out like 6th grade poetry. Here's an example. Out in the yard, your head in the lights, the kids pull your shirt that used to be white. My friend advised me to take a songwriting vacation. Just take a break. So I took a 3-month break, and I didn't have kids at this point, so I was, having fun around Portland, canning peaches, walking around the mountains, listening to lots of music and reading books, and little did I know I was refilling my creative well so that when I did go back, I had those good songs. They finally started coming. I honestly usually feel really depressed at the end of an album cycle. You'd think I'd feel excited, but it's more like, now what? What do I do to structure my time? So to help with this feeling, I recently started the podcast that Ellen mentioned called Midnight Lighting about musician parents. And I also wrote a children's book about a musical hero of mine, Elizabeth Cotton. So working on side projects has been a nice way to take a break from the songwriting burnout. Family. Your artistic family or community can help you when you're stuck too. If you think about how you first got into music, it was probably a family member or a friend who turned you on to it. For me, it was those friends down in at Carleton who were into the underground indie punk scene. And they would say stuff like, you don't know how to play guitar? I can teach you 3 chords, that's all you need to know. Need a poster for your show? I've got a screen printing thing, we can do it together. Don't have a booking agent? You can play at my house. Want to make a record? I have a 4-track in my basement. I was making friends who have become my musical brothers and sisters while also absorbing a do-it-yourself ethic that serves me to this day. I later met my husband Tucker through making albums, and we've worked together for 18 years now. It's not always rainbows and fluffy puppies and unicorns working together with all our competing responsibilities for kids and our job and making records, but I do feel lucky that we found each other. I recently leaned on a musical family member of mine, Sufjan Stevens. I was struggling with how to grapple with our current political landscape in my songwriting for my new record that comes out today. It's called The Lookout. Thank you. And I reached out to him over email. I said, "Thank you for your lyrical bravery on your last album. It's inspiring me to be more brave in my writing now. It's such a fucked up time, it's hard to know what to write about." And he wrote back, "We have the wisdom and the experience to express things boldly. We have the power and the authority and the conviction, the gift of song. Your music changes people's lives. Take responsibility for that and do what you're called to do." After I read that, I felt like I'd gone to church. But I took myself way more seriously after that because he inspired me to find a deeper conviction in myself when writing my new songs. So of all the things I've talked about, don't forget to lean on your artistic family and your artistic community when you need help with something. My next F word is fences. You will experience real roadblocks or fences that are keeping you from your creative life. You might have small kids and you cannot figure out how to get your work done. You might have sick parents that you need to tend to. You might have to work a day job and you're too tired when you get home. Nothing lasts forever. Just because you need to take a break doesn't mean that your creative life is over. It'll still be there when you can return to it. How many of you have heard of Elizabeth Cotton? She's the musician we were talking about before. She was a self-taught African-American guitarist who wrote Freight Train when she was just 13, living in the segregated South in the early 1900s. Freight train, running so fast. Freight train, running so fast. Please don't tell what train I'm on. They won't know what route I've gone. She played upside down without restringing the guitar. So if you check her out on YouTube, if you're a guitar player, it's so fascinating to watch her play. It's a real mind trip. She married young and had a child and then joined the workforce and stopped playing guitar. When she was in her mid-50s, she accidentally met the famous Seeger family, Pete Seeger's family, the musical family, and became their housekeeper. One day the kids heard someone playing in the kitchen, and they walked in and were surprised to see Libba playing they called her Libba, one of the family guitars. It was a wonderful discovery because not only was she an incredible player, she played in such a strange and original way. The Seegers helped spread the word about her music, but it was Libba's quiet perseverance and dedication to her craft that brought the world her voice. And she toured the world as a great-grandmother and got a Grammy when she was 90. She experienced real-life roadblocks. She never let her love of music die, though. It stayed dormant like a seed and emerged late in life. And I love her story because it reminds me that people can take long periods of time away from their creative work and return to it when the time is right. The last F word of the day is force. The theme of this conference is amplifying our voices. Why? The obvious reasons are that music is our job and we need it to make a living and it's fun. Less obvious is that music is a uniting force. It makes us feel less lonely, it opens our hearts, and it fuels our activism. We're experiencing darkness and confusion in our country. Working on music has been a salve for me. It's been a way for me to find hope in what can be a very bleak world. I'm sure many of you have experienced that feeling, that magical feeling of transforming fear and anxiety into something beautiful and true, and artists have the ability to do that. That's our gift. We have the ability to give hope, and that's our responsibility to give hope. If there's an elemental reason to continue making art, it's this. It's not about fame and fortune. At its most basic level, we make art to make sense of the world. So I hope you'll keep putting yourselves out there. Keep believing in yourselves, especially if you've been disenfranchised or ignored. Find ways to stay connected to the joys of your craft. And remember that your story matters. Your music matters. It's a force to be reckoned with. Thank you.